Well, welcome everybody. Welcome to the first art lecture of spring quarter 2021. Today is April 7th. My name is Eirik Steinhoff, and I'm very happy to welcome you all to our first event for this quarter with Tongo Eisen-Martin. This year marks the 10th anniversary for the art lecture series, which provides the Evergreen community with an expansive range of artists, writers, activists, and scholars engaged in contemporary aesthetic inquiry and practice. And now, thanks to the Corona times, we're able to share this resource beyond the Evergreen community, beyond the Olympia community. And so if you're dialing in from elsewhere, welcome. This series was created by Shaw Osha, and she's created and curated this series for the length of its duration. She's on leave this quarter, and so I have the privilege of learning by doing. So our infinite gratitude to Shaw, and also to the media services team, to Raul and the rest of the tech interns helping to support this particular webinar. So we'll begin today with a land acknowledgement, followed by a few brief announcements, and then I will introduce our guest for today. I'll introduce Tongo Eisen-Martin. So the Evergreen State College is located on the ceded territories of the Medicine Creek Treaty Tribes, which include the Squaxin Island tribe, the Nisqually Indian tribe, and the Puyallup tribe of Indians. The Olympia area was historically a center for trade and exchange among many tribes resident to this region. And with this awareness, we honor the ancestors and pay respects to elders past and present of the Medicine Creek Treaty Tribes and to all Native peoples of this land. So the art lectures are happening every other week this quarter, and I'll be able to drop something into our chat here in a moment. In week 2, the art lecture joins forces with the CCBLA, with the Community Center for Community-Based Learning and Action, and we'll be hosting the Jose Gomez Farm Worker Justice Day. Following art lecture, week 6 will be with Cassie Thornton, an artist and organizer, on the poetics of mutual aid. And then week 8, we'll have Evergreen's own literary arts faculty, Miranda Mellis, launching her new book, Demystifications. There's also a series of public seminars that I've linked here in the chat as well, that I invite you to consider participating in. Those will be happening intermittently in relation to these art lectures. And I think you'll observe that there's a lot of overlap between these programs. So with that, let me shift to introducing today's guest. I want to begin my introduction with a provisional definition, and that goes as follows. A poem's fundamental responsibility is to create and maintain a space for desire in language. A poem's fundamental responsibility is to create and maintain a space for desire in language. I think that Tongo's poems perform this responsibility in startling and transformative ways. And I wanted to read a paragraph that our mutual friend David Grundy composed in relation to Tongo's most recent book, which David published, book called Waiting Behind Tornadoes for Food. I think David does a really good job setting the stage for the work that we're about to hear. In this collection, Grundy writes, of poems and of 5 recent essays, his first to be published in the UK, Tongo Eisen-Martin reflects on poetry's role in the tornado-like devastation of current political conjunctures, white supremacist street lynchings, the naked abuse of state power, the classed and racialized effects of a global pandemic. Eisen-Martin's work crackles, investigates, worries, riffs, insists, explodes, presenting an empire in slow eclipse through the lenses of double consciousness, poems, poisons, prisons, dry Leninism. This work is animated by the spark of individual phrases, turns of phrase, refrains, common sense and the senses from the commons, aphorisms, maxims, dispatches from what Joseph Jarman calls the hell of where we are. Eisen-Martin's words are imbued with music, which strains the edge of music and strains the edge of the poem. A chorus of voices filtered, refracted, and remixed through the completely singular voice of its poet. Their architecture ranges across the page like that of Eisen-Martin's native city, San Francisco, and its correlates as they rigorously trace its interstices, attentive to the spaces of daily life, tower blocks, vacant lots, streets, porches, rooms, roads, cars, and the realities of power that cluster in and around them. So all of that's David Grundy framing Tongo's most recent book. Born in San Francisco, Tongo Eisen-Martin is a movement worker, educator, and poet who has organized against mass incarceration and extrajudicial killing of Black people throughout the United States. He is educated in detention centers from New York's Rikers Island to California's San Quentin State Prison. His work in Rikers was featured in the New York Times. Subscribing to the Freirean model of education, he has designed curricula for oppressed people's education projects from San Francisco to South Africa. His latest curriculum on the extrajudicial killing of Black people, We Charge Genocide Again, has been used as an educational and organizing tool throughout the country. He is a co-founder of Black Freighter Press and is San Francisco's 8th Poet Laureate, an office he occupies right now. He uses his craft to create liberated territory wherever he performs and teaches. His books include Somebody's Dead Already, 2015, Heaven is All Goodbyes, from 2017, Waiting Behind Tornadoes for Food, 2021, and then a forthcoming book called Blood on the Fog. I'll turn things over to Tongo in one moment. I'll just alert you all to your capacity to engage in about the last half hour of this presentation, last 25 minutes or so. Tongo will present for about an hour, and then we'll be able to open things up for Q&A. We can do that both through the Q&A function at the bottom, and then we'll also have the possibility of a raise hand function, and we'll see if we can get you dialed in to offer your question in your own voice and with camera on, etc. So we'll talk more about the functionality of Q&A and so forth in about 55 minutes or an hour. And with that, I'll turn things over to Tongo. Welcome.
Thank you very much. And hello to everyone. You can tell by my tires that not everyone who's driven with me is still alive. Also, that I like my drinks neat bottled and in a bus stop. Also, that we're drowning in precinct paper, department store floor plans and applications to the moon. You know, we can change the color of our snot from gifted to heart attack and tell you about ashes, but where are all these angels coming from smelling like the cigarette that fails? And why is the man on the safe side of these headlights freezing up? You got nothing to say at my funeral, I'll speak on your behalf. Heroin in my smile. Mountain made a flatland robbery, among some things on my mind. You know, the last store run in the name of shared afterlife, Friday to the filter, I'm a tall tale on earth. But here's to that angel that never appeared to America, and the night a dog paddle, and a batch of hangovers looking for a home. You know, a lie wouldn't have lived this long. And that's my humor when fences speak. On a pair of rambling dice that got unique tempers and young souls that say, shut up about our city. And here title must crash over a coast, why lie? The street's teeth are in pieces. There's reservoir art on the faces of stragglers. There's sad news from back home that mean we have to grow up on his behalf. Stumble back to a car full of last stand. The truth is stale, but still liquor. Mission Street would be proud of me. I'm a mural man, almost organized. Remember when my lungs would wake up last, walking all morning if it was worth it? I am 3 decades homeless. And reservoir art is all I ever see. And I'm 2,000 miles from my first fight. Maybe no one really survived. Maybe I wrote my first poem for no reason. You know, all street life, to a certain extent, starts fair. Sometimes with a spiritual memory even. Pre-dying soul clap, your father dying even. Maybe I pushed the city too far. My sensitivities to landfill districting and minstrel whistles, white supremacist graffiti on westbound rail guards all overcome and reauthored. Reauthored by revolutionary violence that chose its own protagonist or muted stage of genius. The garbage is growing voices. Condensed Marxism for warrior depressives, underpasses in their pockets because they just might be deities or decent bid on the Panther name, a merciful Marxism. Disquieted home life, a metaphor for relaxing next to a person who is relaxing next to a gun. I stare at my father for a few seconds and return to my upbringing. Return to the souls of Ohio Black folks, you know, revolution damn near pegging at this point. You know what the clown wants? The respect of the ant. Wants to interpret pain only, wants to pull a 38 out of a begging bowl, wants me to hurt my hand on this pen. I'm not tired of these rooms. Just tired of the world to give them a relativity. My only change of clothes prosecuted the government has finally learned how to write poems. Shootouts that briefly align, that make up a parable. Or parables like white bodies are paid well. Or, do white men even have leaders? Are all white people white men? Or rat pictures a river? Can almost taste the racial divide. Can almost roll a family member's head into a city hall legislative chamber. Knows who in this good book will fly. All I do is practice, Lord. Decided not to talk out of anger ever again. Met my wife at the same time I met new audience members for our pain. We passed each other cigarettes and watched cops win. The city gone uniquely linear, Harlem of the West, do a true universe. I will always remember you in fancy clothes, my wife said. So here I sit, twisting in silk ideation. A rifle made of postbellum tar, targets made of an honest language. The San Francisco poetry is how God knows that it's me whining. Hiding among the lesser respected wolves. Lesser observed militarization, Dixie list prison bookkeeping. I mean, the California great coats are coming. Lynch mob gossip and bourgeois debt collection. I mean, it's tempting to change professions mid-poem in a Chicago brief and a white sergeant saying, blank slate for all of us after this black organizer is dead. Standard academics toasting $2 wine at the tank parade, man. They have nothing, Lord. Just nuclear cobblestones, gun line athleticism, and the last of the inherited asthma. Children given white dolls to play with and fear, facial expressions borrowed from rich people's shoestrings. I can hear hate and teach hate and call tools by people names and name people dead to themselves. No one get naturalized except federal agents soon. Carve me equator in the throat soon. Sorry to make you relive all of this, Lord. All of this pre-dime monarchy friends putting up politician posters and snorting the remainder of the page, minstrel script shoveling to the walls by their elders. My children sharpening quarters on the city's edge. You know, for these audiences, I project myself into a ghost-like state. For these gangsters, I do the same. Every now and then, take a nervous look. Eat, sleep becomes Christ. Sleep starts growing a racial identity. Do you ever spiral, Lord? As the gang aides betrayed us, be patient with my poems, Lord. So much pain is a point to crime. I mean, it has to be if race traders come with it. Lord, is that my revolver in your hand? You know, better presidents than these have yawned at cages, have called us holy slaves, filled the school libraries with cop documentaries, baby. I don't have money for food. Well, I have no present moment at all. I go to the railroad tracks and follow them to the station of my enemies. A cobalt-toothed man pitches pennies at my mugshot negative all over the United States. There are toddlers in the rock. I mean, I see why everyone out here got in the big cosmic basket and why blood agreements mean a lot and why it gets shot back at. I understand the psycho-spiritual refusal to write white history or take the glass freeway. White skin tattooed on my right forearm, ricochet sewage near where I collapsed into a rat-infested manhood. My new existence is living graffiti. In the kitchen with a lot of gun cylinders to hack up. House of God in part, no cops in part. My body brings down to Christmas. The new bullets, pray over the blankets made from the old bullets. Pray over the 28th hour's next beauty mark. Extrajudicial Confederate statue restoration. The waistband before the next protest poster. Hey, by the way, time is not an illusion, Your Honor. I will save your desk for last. You are witty, Your Honor. You're moving money again, Your Honor. It is only raining one thing, non-white cops. And prison guard shadows reminded me of spoiled milk floating on an oil spill. A neighborhood making a lot of fuss over its demise, a new lake for a Black Panther party. Malcolm X's ballroom jacket slung over my son's shoulder, the figment of village. A new noose to a new white preacher, all in an abstract painting of a president. They bought slavers some time, didn't it? The tantric screeches of military boats and election Tuesday cars. A cold-blooded study in leg irons proof that some white people have actually fondled nooses. That sundown couples made their vows of love over opaque peach plastic and boat action audiences. The Medgar Evers second is definitely my favorite law of science. Fondle news clippings and primitive Methodists, my arm changes, imperialisms. Simple policing versus structural frenzies. Elementary school script versus even wider white spectrums. Artless bleeding and the challenge of watching civilians think of terrible rituals they have around the corner. They let their elders beg for public mercy. I'm gonna go ahead and sharpen these kids' heads and the arrows myself and see how much gravy spills out of family crest. Modern fans of war, what with their t-shirt poems and t-shirt guilt, and me having on the cheapest pair of shoes on the bus. I have no choice but to read the city walls for signs of my life. A tour guide through your robbery, I also am. Cigarette saying, look what I did about your silence. Ransom water and box spring gold. This decade is only for accent grooming, I guess. Ransom water and box spring gold. The corner store must die. War games, I guess. All these tons from is junk. The start of mass destruction begins and ends in restaurant bathrooms that some people use and other people clean. Are you telling me it's a rag in the sky? Waiting for you, yes. We've written a scene. We set a stage we should have fit in. Warehouse jobs are for communists, but now more corridor and hallway have walked into our lives. Now the whistling is less playful and the barbed wire overcrowded too. My dear, if it is not a city, it is a prison. If it has a prison, it is a prison, not a city. When a courtyard talks on behalf of military issue, all walks take place outside of the body. Dear life to your left, a medieval painting to your right. And that just really makes an impression. Just crop people living in thin air. You have 5 minutes to learn how to see through this breeze. When a mask goes sideways, barbed wire becomes the floor. Barbed wire becomes the roof. 40 feet into the sky becomes out of bounds. When a mask breaks in half, mile which way the odds go. Did you know they killed the world for the sake of giving everyone the same backstory? We're watching Gary, Indiana fight itself into the sky. Old pennies for wind. For that wind feeling you get before the hood goes up and over your headache. Pennies that stick together, mocking all aspirations. Stuck together pennies was the first newspaper I ever read, along with the storefront dwelling army that always lets us down, where the Holy Spirit favors the back room. Souls in a situation that offer 100 ways to remain a loser, man. Souls watching the clock, hoping that eyes don't lie to sad people. What are we talking about again? The narrator asked the graveyard at 10 minutes flat, said the graveyard. The funeral only took 10 minutes, man. Never tell that to anyone again. You just gonna pin the 90s on me? All 30 years of them? Then why should I know the difference between sleep and satire? The pyramid of corner stores fell on our heads. We died right away. That building wants to climb up and jump off another building. These are downtown decisions. Somewhere on this planet, it's August 7th, and we running down the rush thinking one more needs to come with me. Man, what evaporated on Earth so that we could be sent back down? I'm off to make a church bell out of a bank window. Kitchens meant more to the masses back in the day, and before that, we had no enemy. Somewhere in America, the prison bus is running on time. You won't lose your job before revolution hits. Somewhere I won't be home for breakfast. Everyone out here now knows my name and I won't be turned against for at least 4 months. Now the cop in the picket line is a hard-working rookie. The sign in my hands get more and more laughs. It says the picket line got cops in it. I can take care of those windows for if you want, but someone else got to go inside your gas tank. Well, it was clear to man that rich people had talked too much this year. Hey, why don't you go ahead and throw down that marble park bench everyone's looking up at? Get the Romans out of your mind. Maybe a good night's sleep would have changed the last 20 years of my life. Playing the instruments like punching the wall. What would you have me do? Replace the population? Get brotherhood back to the winter? Stop smoking cigarettes with the barely dead? They listen in on the Sabbath. Police called the police on me. There was a white candlestick beneath my detention. I ruined the soup again, thought the judge. As he took off his pilgrim robe behind the white people's door and more. I didn't get lucky. I got what was coming to me. He told, say, fight me back, the man said. Of course, to himself. Washing windows with a will to live. Tin can on his left shoulder. Enjoying the bright brand new black with all party goers, both supernatural and supernaturally down to earth. What is this elevator? Traveling side to side? Like 1,000 bitter Polaroid pictures that you actually try to eat all the furniture on this street nailed to the cement? Cheap furniture, but we have commitment. This morning, an essay opens the conversation between enemies. Why? Because you control every grain of processed sugar between here and a poor man's border. Because in the tin can on my left shoulder, I can hear the engines of deindustrialization. You know, you should get into painting, you know, tell lies more deeply. And this month I'm rooting for the traitor. Carting cement to my pillow. Here we will build. I'm high again. Not talking much. Hey, why don't you climb up the organ pipe to our apartment floor? I'm high again. Calling everything church, sing along to a courtyard, thanks to a horn player's holy pastime. You know, I'm just putting a real jacket on it. You know, talk about a real 5 years. Keep memories like these in the pocket next to the toll receipt. You know, that man lost a wager with the God of good causes. I mean, stood up for himself a little too late. Maybe too early. I can still see 20 angles of his jaw zigzagging through the cold world of deindustrialization. There is an art to it. I will tell my closest friends one day. You know, first I should have apologized to the souls of the house because I'm wearing the cheekbones of the mask only. Like a pill bottle whose name is yours, name tagged on the side of a factory of risk. I mean, teeth of the mask now. Back of the head of the mask now. A new phase of anti-anthropomorphism fending for real faces, stuck with one of those cultures that believes I chose this family. You know, I'm not creative, just the silliest of the revolutionaries. My blood drawn on my only jacket, the police state psychic middleman evangelizing for the creation of an unmasses, an unmedgar. Blood of a lamb less racialized or awesome prison sentence. Right angle made between a point on a Louisiana plantation and a 5-year-old's rubber ball 3 feet high and falling like a deportee plane. To complete my interpretation of garden variety genocide, you know, I'm small talk about loving your enemies a little more realistically. About paper tigers and also gold. I need my left hand back. I broke my neck on a piano key, found paradise in a fist fight. Maybe I should check into the Cuba line. Watching the universe's last metronome, some call Black Jacobins. They just wait. These religions will start resigning in a decade or two. Some colorfully, some transactionally. In a cotton Gothic society, class betrayal gone glassless. I mean, ironically, my window started fogging over too, as I was trying to figure out, you know, which Haiti would get me through the winter, which poem houses souls, which socialist breakthroughs like taking 10 steps back, then finally trying stillness, like introducing Gabriel Prosser to Thelonious Monk. You know, I remember childhood. I mean, I remember childhood, or the word childhood being a beginning. Scribbling on an amazing grace. I mean, I rented this body from some circumference of slavery. Remember being kicked out the Midwest. Strange fruit theater, lithium and circuses, like-minded stomachs, the ruling class blessing their blank checks with levy foam, with opioid tea. Sentient dollar bills yelling to each other, pocket to pocket. Cello stands in the precinct for accompanying counter-revolutionaries. Man, my mother raised me with a simple pain. A poet loses his mind, like the room has weather, or first girlfriend gravity. Difference between me and you is the madness wants me forever. A pair of apartments defining both my family and political composure. Books behind my back, bail money paved into the streets, playing euphoria, cliche. Bracing for the medicine's recoil, sharing a dirty deadly sounds with my friends, Black Jacobins, underground topography of a grandmother's hands. Psychology of the mask now. Teeth of the mask again. You know, a lot of God can happen in 3 seconds. Not much heaven though. Here's a man before a fight. A leave me alone type character. Emerging from the penniless death of a one-way street fiction is a fancy way of saying I'm gonna make it even if I have to drive backwards. All I have is chord changes and 1,000 backhands driving the street like I'm choking it. Car full of nephews. There hasn't been a sun since November and there hasn't been a street I can't choke to death. You know, this city better back down. I mean, you see this gun on the table? And something about staring until it all feels stable. I will not protect everyone on my death sleep late. My son better be quick. My daughter better shoot first because, you know, we fold for no one. We fold for nothing. All right, the first thing you'll feel is the heat. This lady would tell me, trying to tell me about possession and drink life need is what I mostly hear. And most of the world leaves me alone to breathe smog like a giant, to go to jail every once in a while. When the genocide kicks up in late May, when politicians have too easy a time, I'm gassing backwards out a one-way street in honor of myself and in honor of you. if you understand the nature of the world. And how long I've been just like my father. When hell of a resemblance says the anxiety of the neighborhood, this is like a crossroads or a crossroads narrative, or so much crossroads, people get in the habit of turning back, turn back only to find themselves remembering me, but not my last words. A man before a fight, you feel the heat. There's nothing to keep in mind and nothing to remember. Really, there's nothing to be. There's just this moment, then another, then stare, then it all becomes stable, then the table legs go fussy, and Friday's an unfamiliar face peeking in the window. It's cool to panic for a second. Composure is wasted on your worst enemies. People are marked on that sidewalk. You the only thing life size. Everybody knows this in a wire hanger empire. When the blood stops walking, that feeling is not father enough to be permission to fold. You better swing one more time. That father of yours rose from the grave and said, just give me 5 more minutes. You know what else he said? He said, running water is a myth. It's us who are running up, down, and all alongside this water. And people don't rise from the grave. They not laid down neither. It's us who flip all around their body. So beware when the people around you all look like they about to jump. It might be your time. You'll feel the heat. And when 4 walls demand to be 4 walls, and the earth outside mutes, don't panic. Don't try to recreate the earth outside. Don't tell jokes to yourself. Don't even talk disrespectfully to the 4 walls. Instead, unclench your fist and walk away. There might be heaven if you understand the nature of the world. I mean, I talk facing away from the dead. They tend to replace me with the change in my pocket. A penny that's yet to be invented, they say. You have to know how to cut a throat on the way to cutting a throat. After sleeping on a mattress made from 2 garbage bags of clothes, I became content with the small gestures of plantation fires. I mean, playing with couch ashes, I realized how weird the universe was. It exists in so many places, so many random things. It interrupts me while I'm trying to dream. Like your clay correspondence, Lord. To be transparent, I have 20 books next to a bullet like an old man giving advice at the beginning of a revolution. I've really done it, Lord. And explored the mumbles of my mind, explored what's naturally there, and I found no brainwashing. I found Africa, Lord. I have a future. It takes place in the diasporic South. I have morning possessions, modern militancy. Windows to the South. I'll walk on a missile for food. I guess you will not want flowers for a few years, Lord. Will I be tied face to face with the country I murder? I merge with us, Lord. Our old metal versus new metal, our old metal versus a pool of meandering imperialist faces, a multiculturalism of sorts. The dead replaced me with a comedian's chest cavity instead of a chest cavity held tight. It takes a violent middleman for me to talk to myself. Stories that travel through other people's stories, a song about a song, a hemisphere about a hemisphere, stories that travel through a conquered poet. My mother remembers Africa, Lord. She killed on behalf of you, Lord. I wore a machete all winter and no one asked me what it meant. I read 1,000 books in front of the world. What I do is fight poems and sleep through decadent San Francisco prayer circles, watch people play for post-working class associative surfaces or recreations of a governor's desk, ruling class art of utility, playing find a sociopathic bureaucrat. Today, some white people scare even easier. TV in a basket next to a ceramic baby wearing ceramic armor. Musket progeny fantasizing through the art of the poor. Their trendy latches like before God. Black art hunted down like a dog. And hand over my friends, Lord. Lord, I think I'm going to die in the war. Unelected white people in my small house like a blues song of no spiritual effect, a dollhouse H-bomb, a pony show near dead bodies, apartheid weddings that go right, apartheid white people who give birth to mathematicians, the spiritual continuity of barracks and police stations, a chemical interpretation of a Sunday trip to church smells in their pockets, a river mistaken for a talking river, no autobiography outside of small personal victories of violence and drug use, made in the image of God's trinkets with white abolitionists confided in their children about. Chemical assurances that they will switch from black artist to white artist, from black God to white God, from black worker to white worker. I think about you cautiously, Lord, in the same way I think about my childhood, Lord. Foxhole Friday nights, most of life is mute. A comedian points out a planet's field to a priest, King Sugar Cane, King Cotton King, revolutionary, the Bible Central, containing all modes of shallow introduction, introducing an unlisted planet class, speaking about fevers and balance sheets and reassuring the masses that we could figure out our fathers later. No, a priest took my mother lightly, Lord. Stood in front of parishioners, re-raveling fantasies about black art. Priest reading confidently before I broke him and broke his parallel. After the day, I've never been a poet before. A little brother watches his big brother's friends. They lean rifles on sheltered walls. They agree with me and call it literature, man. It is a simple matter, this revolution thing. To really lie to no one. to keep nothing godlike, to write a poem for God. I think I'm gonna leave the poetry there. What I'll, a couple more cents to add, and I know that was a few. Wanted to speak a little bit. Well, I mean, zooming in or panning, panning away from this kind of neo-Confederate tendency that is currently trying to save capitalism. I think it's the interrogation. It's the interrogation of whiteness, or the monopoly of violence that is whiteness. The deputization that is whiteness, which is crucial, to understanding what exactly we are organizing against, or even surviving despite of, and then to get it to a more digestible slice to zoom in even more to this thing of extrajudicial killing of Black people. So actually, my mother in 2012, after Trayvon Martin was murdered by what was that cat's name, Zimmerman. She wondered, well, has anybody actually like done the numbers lately on extrajudicial killing of Black people killed by police or security guards or vigilantes? And the answer was no. So she started digging, and after compiling every case, and actually being academically responsible, because she did not count cases where race wasn't explicitly given, but you could assume based on where the killing took place that the victim of police impunity was probably Black. But conservatively or responsibly, that's that's actually, never use those two words close together again. One Black person is killed every 28 hours in the United States. And so she compiled all these numbers and stories and put together a nice, a really sociological study called Operation Ghetto Storm. Operation Ghetto Storm, actually that title is something the police used. There was a police expo or something like that, and there were T-shirts that they were wearing saying Operation Ghetto Storm. Yeah, I don't know, for those of us who remember, the first Bush's greatest hits, Desert Storm was the first Bush's imperialist efforts in the Middle East. So they themselves know that that they're that they're an occupying army. But anyway, so what I was then tasked to do was to write a curriculum to give an ideological kind of framework for this reality. And I guess to give you, you can go to operationghettostorm.org where the study and the curriculum is there, just PDFs for free. And I think the study is much more important than my curriculum, but you know, hopefully you find something of worth. At the very least, read the study. But what so here, you know, here's the some highlights. So what you know what we found was that in most cities, you know, regardless of the percentage of the population who were Black, the overwhelming majority of killings, of police killings, were of Black people. And in some cities, there was even 100%. We found that there's no geographic sanctuary in the United States. So, like, there's no region north, south, east, west. There's no region where the country where Black people are less likely to be killed by police. 88% of the cases, the police officer's life was not in immediate danger, as written up by them. 43% of Black people murdered by police were stopped just for suspicion. So, you know, driving while Black, walking while Black, you know, that idiom. 66% of Black people murdered were between the age of 2 and 31. Yes, a 2-year-old was killed that year. Only 24% of people killed were in the course of a police officer actually investigating a crime. And of course, we know that the majority of those crimes were not were not capital crimes, right? Were not something you're supposed to be put to death for. 19% were 911 calls for family members asking for help with another family member who was going through an emotional crisis. 19%. 7% were domestic violence calls. 7% did absolutely nothing wrong, and the police admitted that they had no reasonable basis to detain them. 20% allegedly had a gun, although the you know, like the what was the brother in Minneapolis, something Castile, you know, they had legal guns. There's some had legal guns, or were in states where guns are legal. Or only 13% of that, and only 13% of that 20 allegedly shot the gun. 47% in 47% of the cases, the cop or security guard just said that they felt threatened, but had no evidence of weapons. And you know, of that 13% who had, you know, allegedly shot a gun, that not all of those were when the police were there. They were to have allegedly shot a gun. Only in 7% of the cases did somebody actually point a gun at a police officer. And again, that's alleged. 3% allegedly reached for the police officer's waistband, and 3% allegedly lunged. Of all of these killings, only 8% of the killers were charged with anything, and the majority of those no police were convicted, and the majority of those even just charged were just security guards or vigilantes like Zimmerman. Okay, so what we what we kind of see evidence of is that, that that again, whiteness, or we'll do well to to we would do well by our praxis to come to terms with the fact that that whiteness is not about privilege. It's not, and I highly recommend everybody read The Counter Revolution of 1776 by Gerald Horne, who shows just that basically whiteness is a deputization, because it's born of actually a permanent war with First Nations people and Black people, right? A permanent repression of slave revolt, and we see that extrajudicial murder of Black people doesn't correlate with criminality. Just doesn't. It doesn't correlate with criminality. It's only for the sake of this white establishment violence. So in the curriculum, there kind of some breakdowns, better minds than me have said it better. So, for example, Frantz Fanon said, "We see how the government's agents uses a language of pure violence. The colonized world is a world divided in two. The dividing line, the border, is represented by the barracks and the police stations. In the colonies, the official legitimate agent, the spokesperson for the colonizer in the regime of oppression, is the police officer or the soldier." Ida B. Wells, who led the anti-lynching movement in the 1890s, which, lynching is also what we can liken extrajudicial killing to, or police murder to. Our country's national crime is lynching, she said. It is not the creature of an hour, the sudden outburst of uncontrolled fury, or the unspeakable brutality of an insane mob, right? And it's not just the bad apples. This is the national culture, really. The United States really cannot function without the murder of oppressed people here and abroad. And that point of kind of imperialism abroad, or genocide abroad is genocide here, actually is an interesting point preambled in this original indictment of the United States as practicing genocide against Black people, which was brought to the kind of the world courts by William Patterson, W.E.B. Du Bois, Paul Robeson, and these cats in like the 50s. And in fact, the title of the curriculum, We Charge Genocide Again, is a riff off of the name of the book We Charge Genocide, which is, I also highly recommend, was the indictment. Which, interestingly, I don't even think she did it on purpose, but it was a similar to my mother's study, and it was it was just case after case. They had a good preamble and they had some breakdowns, and then they just listed all of these cases of police murder and lynching, as well as other arguments about, well, like you see medical apartheid that's still disproportionately killing people of color today. Go all tagged down though to this UN definition of genocide, which was which was in response to what the Nazis did, right? And so that was kind of part of that was part of Patterson and Cruz kind of plea that no, you don't have, like, that mass murder at home means mass murder abroad. You know, this is so if you let this reality go unchecked, this is just going to be, you know, and I mean, and we see how much, you know, we see how many, you know, really generations is just destroyed by U.S. hegemony. But let's excuse me. This is my first conversation of the day. I haven't yawned yet. This UN definition of genocide, I think, is instructive. So it was adopted in 1948. Quote, in the present convention, genocide means any of the following acts committed with intent to destroy in whole or in part a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group. As such, A, killing members of the group, B, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group, C, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part, D, imposing measure intended to prevent births within the group, E, forcibly transferring children of the group to another group. And that last one, man, really should really put a tear instantly on all of our eyes when we just think about the children of the asylum seekers who were, you know, basically caged by Trump and currently caged by Biden. I think they were caged by Obama before as well. It just was a little bit under the radar, less public, less of a rallying, less of a organizing tool like Trump made it. But you know, this is this is the United States. You know, this is the United States character life. If this was a, you know, if this was some kind of theater. But now what's the, you know, what's the ideological reality of our genocide? What is transposed upon me right now as I'm talking? So one thing Fanon said, as if to illustrate the totalitarian nature of colonial exploitation, the colonist turns the colonized into a kind of quintessence of evil. The Black person is declared impervious to ethics, representing not only the absence of values, but also the negation of values. He is, dare we say it, the enemy of values. So this is, you know, this is the necessary this is the necessary projection to maintain to maintain this monopoly of violence, right? And I'm not just not just moral, immoral. I don't just lack moral, lack value. I'm actually the enemy of value, enemy of morals. I am your super predator. You know? Right? Yeah, you can't. Well, you can't do anything with me except kill me. That's all you can do. What can you do? What can you do with the enemy of values? What can you do with the enemy of principles? You can't. You can't. I can't even be educated. I have to be. I have to be destroyed. You know, and how would they? You know. How would, you know, what also atrophies in those who allow themselves to be deputized by whiteness is just a complete a lack of critical thinking and resolve. I mean, I'd be well said, brave men do not gather by thousands to torture and murder a single individual. So gagged and bound, he cannot make even feeble resistance or defense. Or from the petition, Pat Patterson and folks said that, bored and gullible people desperate for something to do, impoverished both mentally and physically by the doctrines and practices of white supremacy, are susceptible to incitations to lynching, particularly when the act is endowed with civic virtue, with an aura of protecting all that is holy from all that is all that is profane, right? So this is a this is kind of a hard. There's like no way to land this delicately. no way to close this except to say that, if the system's whole material basis is permanent war, how would it ever reform itself? If its superstructure, its ruling class, if its ruling class's whole existence requires not just exploitation, but also a permanent war against people of color, like Malcolm X said, America cannot produce freedom for Black people no more than a chicken can lay a goose egg. And if a chicken ever were to lay a goose egg, we'd certainly say that was revolutionary. Or Paulo Freire, that basically a slaveocracy doesn't even have within its DNA, or doesn't have doesn't have within its structures the DNA to even become a democracy. That no situation of absolute power and just heartless mass violence can even that doesn't transform itself poetically. It can't do it poetically. It can't do it sociologically. like that people don't give that up. And we see even more evidence again by the January 6th deadly performance, that it keeps reproducing itself until we truly transform this society. And there's nothing in here but books on physics and guitars. The physics I don't understand that well, but I like it. Good poems. I would love to ride off into the sunset, and with my groovy preoccupations and hobbies. But we see we're in kind of what looks like an epochal shift that can go terrible. I mean, we know that the biosphere cannot sustain this in this system, and we know that that it's just more and more that we're only getting more and more violent, and so it's going to require people really committed to a revolutionary transformation. It doesn't happen kind of organically. Or no, you can say resistance is organic, but not spontaneously. So it is the end of my crying in the wilderness. Are there any questions on anything? Even on the poetry, we talk about that as well.
Thank you so much, Tongo. Really great to hear the poems, and then now in the second half to have some of the context around that curriculum. Um, and so I would invite everybody and anybody to post questions on the Q&A. We can also use the raise hand function. So I think we're probably going to start blowing up Canvas's capacity to process all of your inquiries. So keep them coming in. I'll try to be a kind of, I don't know what, Q&A jockey or something. I might have one question to get things rolling, and you take it any way you wish, Tongo. I think there's one piece I'm curious about, which is, so we heard about we heard your poems, and then we've heard the context around We Charge Genocide Again, coming out of the bigger Operation Ghetto Storm project. I'm curious to hear about the work that you've been doing in the community. I know now you're poet laureate for San Francisco, so that has a particular set of duties and expectations, et cetera. But of course, you've been doing that work for a long time beforehand. And so I guess it goes to the question of the role of the poet in relation to these circumstances. And maybe it also goes to the role of the poem, the relationship between communities and poems, poetry and revolution. I don't know how to put together a tidy question, but I'm just putting a couple of those terms in motion to see if you've got anything to say in response.
Yeah, my unsuccessful movement work, or maybe ineffective movement work actually began actually not as a poet, but as a school teacher, as a youth worker. I kind of after after teaching in jails, alternative schools, and alternative to incarceration programs, and youth homeless shelters, and places where you find the most oppressed. What I found was that it didn't matter how strong my efforts were; they were always being absorbed by greater institutional agendas. And even just thinking about I can set up a magical classroom, but and have someone in there for 2 hours, but after then the world holds sway, or the white ruling class holds sway over the other 22 hours. So if I'm really going to really interfere with someone's oppression, it has to be outside of the system's institutions. And so my first stop was I went down to Mississippi to do some organizing work in there. My work, along with kind of doing the curriculum work on extrajudicial killing, I was doing organizing around mass incarceration, and in general, and in people's assemblies, kind of like embryonic people's like self-determination or self-governance, political education classes, that would, and working on a kind of like the creating a network or economy of scale of worker-owned cooperatives in Mississippi, and since I had to come back to San Francisco, worked around extrajudicial killing and just general kind of like exercises of unity. But for me, it's I am the political education teacher in the in the collectives, and I think that, it's just like that's consciousness is really the only thing, and is the is the just the life's blood of any movement effort. So if I was to describe my kind of work, is political education. I forget the other part of the question, but I do want to say that, like, I'm a proponent of giving each facet, each really each aspect of humanization is due. So, poetry, art has a basics, and I engage it on its terms. Movement has a basics, has a praxis that needs to be engaged on its terms. Away from comfort zones with all facets, right? And then whatever kind of hybrids my life synthesizes, that's groovy, but it's you should just be a revolutionary first. Don't worry about being a revolutionary this or a revolutionary that. Not just don't even say another word after revolutionary. You are a revolutionary. You find the current, if you find the current socialization of power and production and violence unacceptable, you're a revolutionary. Now we have to figure out how to transform the social reality, and it requires you to like, it requires you to do stuff you suck at. Like, I can't start a conversation from scratch to save my life, but it's like, look, we got to knock on these doors, let people know, that our cooperative membership, the membership to the cooperative is open, and we want to just spread the word. I got to knock on doors and just be awkward. Or if there's a political education class we want to invite everybody to, we got to hit the streets. I don't really, I'm not like I'm not a protest person, but I gotta go. I don't really enjoy it, but hey, and just doing, and just kind of just doing what we have to do, on its own terms. And then actually, the justice of it is actually your poetry actually improves, though. The best political poems are written by people who are actually engaged in the political praxis, or any commitment to any kind of acknowledgement, study, and commitment to a bigger picture. Like, if you want your craft to evolve, just add another bigger picture to interact with.
I think we've got a question. I'm not sure if it adds a bigger picture or a smaller picture, but it has a big word in it, and I think it goes to some local developments in the Bay Area. So the question is, what do you think of the utopia offered by big tech, hedge fund managers, entrepreneurs, etc., in the Bay Area?
It's like ethnic cleansing. It's, well, it's interesting. I think this is actually like a kind of just a feature of late stage imperialism that's basically ready to liquidate, either literally or poetically, this surplus population that don't no longer need a working class that it hasn't needed since the 70s. And so just kind of in this and as the service economy, you know, uh, has that has very little trace of actually of production or productive force in it. We end up in this kind of like upper class consumer fantasy, really kind of now mimicking like Paris and Rio de Janeiro, where like the cities are kind of like upper middle class and up, and the surrounding regions are the ghettos and the slums. And so, I think, it's trippy because it's like tech sounds like Star Trek: The Next Generation, you know what I mean? But no, this is just corporate, this is just a seat of a throne of corporate power here. But what's interesting, I think, people or something to kind of to bounce off of, is thinking about the what was deindustrialization of the United States in response to. Now, yes, right, you can make more dollars if you send production to places that where workers can be exploited, 10, 100 fold, right? True, right? Also, deindustrialization was in response to growing, a growing militancy, especially from people of color whose, our organizations were growing, not just growing, more kind of like, not just a militant personality as far as really, not just confrontational, but internationalist in analysis, right? And so, and we saw this kind of mass willingness to burn down the playground. So, what they saw that we can't have, we can't have our productive forces this close to these militant hands of color, and so they started, shipping production overseas. But now, what's the one thing that can't be deindustrialized and in fact has to be here? Tech, right? So you see how in the Bay Area we never stood a chance, and people say like we've had the hyper gentrification now that they like to tie down to certain booms, but they've been shooting at us since the 60s. They've been trying, they've been trying to take us out. They've been taking as many black people out, brown people out as they could. This whole since the 60s. Then they built this one freeway over. They took out 12,000 black homes, to build this freeway. This has really been a war of attrition. But you couldn't. There's no way. You can't have all, you can't have oppressed people this close to to industry. So it's just, it's what's funny, it's not even a utopia though for the people who enjoy it. It's a pretty mind-numbing experience. These people people run around thinking of products they don't even want, or don't like. People, their projects they don't really, the stuff they don't really want to build. Like these people could really be, like brilliant scientists, astronauts, you know what I mean? But they're really just sitting here facilitating. They're just facilitating hyper consumerism. and so they just, you know, they do this kind of like mind-numbing work, and then they kind of party in a city that's grown more and more corny, you know. It's not, it's not enviable. It's just basically, it's just they just caught everybody slipping, and that you have to be a corporate employee to live in a city. That's all that's happened. It's not even like anything stimulating is going on, and it's not even like the majority of these people are actually even scientists too, as well. You know, it's just a lot of corporate employees. You know, like they'll have a science, they'll have a sciencey name, a sciencey job title, but they actually don't, like, yes, my job is to make sure that the product is feasible. Like, you know, it's just it's all it's all for corporate hegemony. So, and I don't think it's too unnatural. Like, it's not. I actually don't think it's sustainable. You know, it's trippy. Like, I've said this before to people, but like, it's not even like there's no, not just like, oh, there's no more black and brown people. There's no more teenagers in San Francisco. It's trippy. It's unnatural. Rolling around a city that don't even really have that many teenagers. You know, it's just like it's off. It's not going to maintain itself. I don't think.
Yep. Big word, big question, passionate answer. Thank you very much. Not a lot of teenagers, but boatloads of toddlers.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to shift the gears on these questions. I'm going to combine two. Somebody's been doing some forensic analysis of your surroundings, and they saw Gil Scott-Heron back there. And so the question is, how has Gil Scott-Heron influenced your poetry and performance? I could see it in your poetry and the way you speak. And then I noticed you had him in the background, and I figured I'd ask. That's the first one. I got a second one, related question, more general. What was your relationship with music growing up? And did that relationship contribute to your poetry as well as to your activism work?
Okay. I'm going to say something now that you know, and I want to put it super gently, because I think this all of the time, and I just never say it, you know, because I don't want to, like, but I don't want to ruin or interfere with anybody's fate. But ever, like, the don't look at craft in terms of influence. Don't worry about your influences. This is just a good looking poster. This is a good looking poster, made by a friend of mine, and this is just kind of like the most civilized corner of this room I'm in. You know what I mean? Okay. No, but I'm not. Or how am I gonna put it? Let me put it kind of like less sarcastic. In answer, well, so you know, I grew up, you know, I grew up in kind of a house or in a village where really we just have various moods of critical thinking. Okay, so one mood, you know, reading, you know, reading and discussing political theory, you know, another mood of critical thinking, you know, trying to organize folks or talk with folks. Another mood of critical thinking, Gil Scott-Heron or, you know, Peter Tosh on a plan, you know, but you know, the really, you know, the kind of like the journey to your voice as a poet or whatever your craft in is really just really just you figuring out what makes you tick, and you just kind of like taking your nature and dancing with it, taking your internal nature and just dancing with it, taking the natural shapes of your imagination and dancing with it, taking the natural shapes of reality, and almost using the poem just tracing them is just really a trace of them, you know. And it's just a danger, because I did, and I could just give you the stock, you know, like, oh yeah, you know, Gil Scott Heron's great, beautiful influence, and then you know what I would do to try to help you out? I'd be like, you know, also great is Audre Lorde and Roque Dalton, and I could have springboarded you like that, but I know I noticed in these questions that it's like that it's almost like people evaluate art and define themselves in relationship to art through kind of like the gravity fields of like people, of a person, of this artist or that. And there's just like, there's so much more to mind. And in fact, you know, like the product of my craft is just really a running conversation. I just keep going in my head at all times as far as like what poetry is, and those conclusions basically become the next batch of poems. Also, too, you know, there are, I mean, there's also just kind of just like there's a lot of, you know, kind of like there's just a universality of certain mechanics. So, you know, like, yes, yeah, perhaps, you know, I mean, we also, you know who I first really sounded like, though, tell you the truth? The first person I kind of sounded like, you know, that period of just emulation when your style is really just somebody else. Actually, it was Saul Williams, I'd say Saul Williams was the first person I like emulated, like, or when I was in a period of emulation, it was probably more Saul Williams. But you know, I'm sure there's all kind of things imprinted upon me. But like, if you really want to get to it, you know, or what's the journey? Again, it's really just it's one, it's noticing all your mental processes, and then it's kind of dancing with them, and just a lot of time, you know, just a lot of time. Like, this is really just me, like 10,000 pages later, you know. I don't, you know, I just feel like I just kept telling myself, like either next time or the time after, I'm just gonna have to really like make it plain for someone, like, no, don't, it's dangerous. And maybe that's not your because I can't hear you, so I don't know like I don't know the tone, but you know, you can hear it when people ask about, like, oh, I hear all kinds of, oh, you sound like Bob Kaufman. Was Bob Kaufman like a great influence on you? And I'm just like, man, I didn't even read Bob Kaufman until somebody told me I sounded like him. You know what I mean? like is the journey, you know, the journey is you, it's really like really you.
Yeah. I hear what you're saying, though, also about not being able to hear the tone of that question. That makes a difference. And I think actually we've got a chance to hear somebody live, to hear a live question for something new and different. Is that possible, do you think, Raul, that we could get Jordan dialed up for a question? I don't know if we'll be able to see Jordan, but we can hear. Go for it, Jordan. I think we should be able to hear you now.
All right, you guys hear me? Mm-hmm. All right, cool. So I just want to say, like, what you've been talking about is super intimate for me and like touches close to home, because I actually just got out of prison after spending almost my entire 20s inside. And I'm a poet as well, and I'm writing several books kind of regarding some of the stuff that you're talking about. And my main practice, though, which I feel like you've talked about a little bit but really haven't expounded on, which I kind of want to ask you about, was like, you mentioned like letting go, I'm paraphrasing, but like letting go of anthropomorphizing. And then also you mentioned something that like I interpreted as kind of like heaven is at hand if we can see it. I was wondering if you could like expound on that a little bit.
Okay. Yeah, so the so the you know kind of the yeah, almost like the dance with the dance with heaven. You know, is is actually born of a third food group. So you have your you have your praxis as a poet. You have your praxis as a revolutionary, which is really just two praxis as a human being. But what you also need is just kind of like that internal cultivation. For me, it's meditation. But anything that any practice that have you kind of just relax into the interconnectedness of things, or you know, relax your you know, relax your concept of yourself. So when four walls demand to be four walls and the earth outside mutes, don't panic, don't try to recreate the earth outside, don't tell jokes to yourself, don't even talk disrespectfully to the four walls. Instead, unclench your fist and walk away. There might be heaven if you understand the nature of the world. That's basically what that line is voting for. And it's crucial, like whatever, and again, whatever floats your cultivation boat. You know what I mean? Like, for me, it's meditation, and kind of this, and studying the idea, the ideas behind it, in the kind of certain lineages of thought. But whatever kind of brings you to that. And it's interesting how that it also greatly enhances not just the way you relate to reality, but also it enhances the way you relate to your craft. I can probably when I see leaps and bounds in my craft and in my life as a whatever revolutionary. It's usually precipitated by almost a kind of like an internal commitment. The new phase of anti-anthropomorphism was so it was so I'm riffing off of the the mask, right? So I'm wearing the cheekbones of the mask on, and it's like like blah blah blah, teeth of the mask. Now I'm seeing a mask, or the majority of a mask disappearing. So it's on. You have cheekbones, and you have teeth, then you have the back, right? And so back of the head of the mask now, a new phase of anti-anthropomorphism, fending for real faces. Back of the fending for real faces, right? And it's actually not it's like it's not a permanent. It's not a permanent preoccupation of craft, right? So I'm saying right, like I'm talking about real people. I'm in these poems. I'm talking about real people. I'm standing up for real people. I'm not, you know what I mean? Like I'm not animating. I'm not animating concepts. I'm not animating. Like these are not inanimate objects come to life. These are not animals come to anything. Like this is not magical, right? That however psychedelic the language is, this is real people I'm talking about, talking for or living for, But you know, that's not necessary just as far as like, you know, to if you think about the trajectory of your craft, it's like it's constantly shifting. And so it's like in this incarnation, that this is what I'm doing right now. Especially like, and I think it's just kind of appropriate to this stage of history in which we have to grow all the way up. We have to come to terms with every slice of our consciousness and every slice of material, you know, of material reality, because it is, again, it is just it's consciousness that reinforces this ruling class power. You know, I mean, you know, another thing, you know, that Fanon says is like, you know, they you know, so it has to be a kind of a mental project, because they literally cannot hold a gun to everybody's head. I mean, they could beat you up and plant that, you know, and then plant that and bend your psyche to that violence, right? And bend your will to that violence, which was really to bend your will to theirs. But they can't beat us all up every day, right? So right now it's almost it's a cultural project that is necessary. Just transforming the way we relate to ourselves and relate to each other. It kind of, you know, to back to like, well, how does a poet or a poem play or dance with movement? It's the cultural efforts to transform how people relate. And so in this slice right now, what I'm voting for is that what's really happened and what's really happening, all of it.
So I think we've got time for one more question. I'm going to combine a couple of them. A question about whiteness. How does a white person get out of that deputization? That'd be one question. If there's a deputization that comes with the project of whiteness. And then another question that may or may not be related is, what elements are most important for reimagining community safety? And that's a reminder that this is co-sponsored by a course called Reimagining Community Safety. I know that's not fair to give you both those questions in our short time remaining, but there it is.
Well, you know, we can't get, and it's the same prescription for white people, for everybody, is we have to get back into revolutionary organization. That is nothing is an individual journey, nothing is an individual event, or your individual, all of your hopes and dreams and aspirations do not exist beyond, or are not invincible to the way the bigger collections that you're a part of, because you are part of an organized political agenda one way or the other. And so we need, you know, we need revolutionary. We need to Black Panther up again. You know what I mean? Yeah, you go ahead and give it another shot. And you know, and in those times, you know, there was the you know, the Young Patriots. There was the, you know, as you saw with the in that Fred Hampton movie, you know, SDS, Weather Underground. You know, white people was doing it too. You know, and so, you know, I think just so you know, join the Communist Party. I don't know. You know, I don't know what's going on. But or organization. That's it, and that's for everybody. And then as far as community safety, organization. You know, I mean, because it's really a matter of like, you know, well, how is reality actually facilitated and actually determined? it's determined by organization, right? And so if we want to determine our reality, I mean, it's just basically like, you know, and now do I have the structures and prescriptions? I'm glad we run out of time. What these things are supposed to look like. But, you know, the more that what you walking outside in is determined by a collective that you are a part of, the safer we'll all be. But that's why, again, why it's just like, man, we have to be revolutionaries. And then, you know, and then you can be whatever else on top of that. But like first, like we have to determine our reality. How now what are this, and that scaffolding organization is the start though.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Tongo. We ran out of time. We ran out of time more quickly than I knew was possible. I think that's what I have to say. We're actually 2 minutes over, so that means I'm going to owe all of you 2 minutes for my bad time management here. I wish we could somehow make applause happen. I'll just sit here like this and say, thank you so much, Tongo. Wonderful to spend this morning with you. Looking forward to more opportunities to connect and get organized.
Right on, right on. Yeah, respect. Much love to y'all.
All right.
Yeah.
See you all next time.